in the past, we always used to think about wildlife and biodiversity as something that you have to go to the Western Ghats or you have to go somewhere else. And if cities do not contribute to biodiversity conservation, that we may actually lose the plot.
ನಾವು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕೇನು. You have to go at least 70 kilometers around and start talking to those people. Many of the things are irreversible here. ಅದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗದೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ.
Right.
So they'll be cautious about it.
It took 3 or 4 concerned citizens to say that the Hesatalgutta grasslands were under threat and something needs to be done about it. And so it got protected. Namaskara, Bengaluru. This was a city which was known for its gardens. Plants and trees have been brought here from all parts of the world. The colorful summers are a reflection of the generosity of the city towards various species of trees which have come from Latin America, from the Kew Gardens, from Mauritius and other places. Recent land use land cover images on various magazines and various papers show a dismal picture of concretization, tarring, asphalting, and generally destruction of trees and biodiversity. Lakes are disappearing, wetlands are shrinking, and the city is in a bit of a crisis vis-a-vis biodiversity. Biodiversity is not just about trees alone, it's about the entire spectrum of plant and animal species which occupy a particular geography. To discuss what does climate change mean to biodiversity and vice versa, we have with us Professor Jagdish Krishnaswamy. He's Dean of the School of Environment and Sustainability at IIHS, an eco-hydrologist and landscape ecologist whose research spans climate impacts, biodiversity conservation, and urban ecosystems. He has contributed to global initiatives like the IPCC and IPBES. I think Jagdish, you were in the recent committee on IPCC's report writing too. He led conservation planning for the Western Ghats and is building Bengaluru's first-time long-term urban ecological observatory. We've also with us Sunil Ramareddy. He's an environmental engineer and conservation practitioner in Bengaluru, specializing in water body rejuvenation and wildlife conservation. You have restored over 15 lakes and developed water holes in key protected areas. As a board member of the Wildlife Conservation Group, you champion community-driven nature-based solutions that enhance urban and ecological resilience. So we're going to talk about biodiversity in the city in an era of climate change and global warming. So let me start by asking you, Professor Jagdish, what does biodiversity mean in the context of Bengaluru? And how will climate change impact it, apart from the urbanization that the metropolis is following?
Yeah, so biodiversity means a lot of things to the people of Bengaluru. From the flowers that people come out early morning to pick for their puja or for their other cultural activities, to the bird song that they hear in the morning, to the feeling of wellness and goodness that they get from the sounds and smells and sights of nature, which means a lot, to all the way to the cooling effect of green and blue spaces, the water bodies, the green urban forests, gardens, as well as the pollination services from bees for some of the fruits and vegetables that actually many Bengalurians are trying to grow in their home gardens and so on. So actually it meets a wide variety of things. It includes things like bats eating mosquitoes every evening. And also overall, I would say that Bengaluru's image as a green city itself is something that many citizens of Bengaluru will identify with, given the rate of urbanization, the noise and light pollution, as well as other forms of pollution that we're exposed to. We really need these green spaces of various kinds of different components of biodiversity. And in the coming years, as global warming, as well as the heat island effect of all the concretization in Bengaluru, that two together raise temperatures, I think that we will really need this connection between biodiversity and human well-being to be a main pillar of Bengaluru's future planning.
Excellent. So, as you point out, biodiversity is not just about the indicators of the various species that they are, but they are functional also in terms of the ecological ecosystem services that they provide to us. And the city needs biodiversity for its own sake, for the kind of benefits that we derive, which could be human-centric, right? But the city in its master plans over the last so many years has only a Kabban Park and a Lal Bagh to boast about in terms of large green spaces. It luckily has the Banerghatta National Park, which is close by, and it's got the beautiful Hesarghatta grasslands, which was recently protected, right? Are there other ecotones or smaller biomes that need special focusing in the master plan that the city needs to develop around biodiversity?
So one, I think, feature of many cities, but especially Bengaluru, are the campuses of educational institutions, industry, corporates,
and the RB land.
and the area under the defense. These are actually important, including things like the military dairy farm, which is in the Hebal area. There's just an example of an area controlled by the defense. All of these actually add up to quite a bit of the biodiversity support system of Bengaluru. And the University of Agriculture Sciences campus, for example, still has slender lorises. One of the iconic species of Bengaluru. There are only 3 to 4 places in Bengaluru where they are breeding. And the Indian Institute of Science campus also has a population of slender lorises. Bengaluru, in spite of all what has happened over the years, depending on how you define the city limits, has anywhere between 250 to 300 species of birds, which is remarkable. We have leopards on our outskirts. We have 12 to 15 species of bats. We have many species of butterflies. So we can really be proud of our biodiversity heritage, and we hope to build on it. And I think that it also requires that we think imaginatively about smaller green spaces, because we can't have large green spaces everywhere in the city, which means that any space that is available for some greenery to be there, I think we need to be very careful about how we plant, how we maintain it, because all of these smaller green spaces, I think, will add up to providing a lot of benefits to citizens in different parts of the city, because we find that the green spaces are not, they have some historical legacy of where they are found. And it's going to be increasingly difficult to set aside large areas for urban forests or gardens, and therefore we must encourage smaller green spaces which are well distributed.
Right. So most of it not as manicured lawns, but as spots of biodiversity which need to be understood in that local context.
Yes.
Right. So the importance of biodiversity and the beautiful functions that biodiversity as it exists in Bangalore, it's been detailed out. You work on water bodies too, and restoration of water bodies. How do you see biodiversity and water body restoration combining together? Are we doing enough on that front when we restore water bodies?
So if I have to give a context, if the water bodies also fall into the biodiversity or ecology, I would definitely say yes. They play a very big part in a city like Bangalore. So we know how the landscape of Bangalore is and how many water bodies have been shrinked from past years. So with whatever we are present with, I'm very sure that around 80% of them are not functional. Why they help when it comes to biodiversity hotspot is that there are many species that depend on this water bodies. Like we might have birds, insects. There are a variety of biodiversity that depends only on these water bodies, and especially the connecting bridges between two upstream and downstream lakes act as marshy lands. Again,
Right.
they bring different kind of biodiversity to that place, which is now we are currently lacking in that space, or we have concretized it so much that these birds cannot forage in that particular place. So earlier we used to see a lot of painted strokes. They used to come when I was saying, I used to only think that they were there in Rangandi too, but in larger lakes like Vartur Agirbodu, Nalluralli, Jakkuru still has some few coming and going. I see them. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಾಸ್ತಿನೇ ಇದೆ. It is planned that way. So ಈಗ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ. The smaller bodies in larger water bodies, they are still there. They still come, but they're not nesting. They're just passing by. They stay there for food and they're passing by. So if they have to stay there, we have to plan it much more better way. And one of the things that's lacking is, again, the people who are restoring it are not seeing from the ecological or biodiversity perspective in the design of it. If we take a detailed project report of the lake that doesn't show us the biodiversity, okay, that is where we have to stress a little bit more rather than only the civil part of it.
ಸೊ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಏನ್ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇದೇ ರೀತಿ 186 ಕೆರೆಗಳಿವೆ ನಮ್ಮ BBMP ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಇತ್ತೀಚಿನ ವರದಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ BBMP ಅಂತ. ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ 183 ನೀರಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ BBMP ನವರು. ಅವ್ರ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕೆರೆಗಳು. ಪ್ರತಿ ಒಂದ್ ಕೆರೆನೂ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕೊಕ್ಕರೆ ಬೆಳ್ಳೂರ್ ತರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾ ಡಿಸೈನ್? ಮನಸ್ಸು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ತರ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ನಾವು ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾ?
Sir, it's more like each lake has its own functionality. Each lake has it depends upon the community which is around also. Like I can give you examples, like if you're taking in the core urban areas, they will serve more for human health. If you're making pathways and all, I'm not telling no against Sankey Tank agirbodu, Kaikundralli agirbodu, any of the lakes that are developing right now, they're concentrating more towards human health. Human health recreational purpose, walking, children park. They are planning on doing butterfly parks ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ, but they're not being maintained to that level.
ಬೇರೆ ತರಾನೇ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾ ಮತ್ತೆ ಯಾವ್ದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಗಮನ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ?
One of the problems ಇವಾಗ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾವು ಇವಾಗ ಬಫರ್ ಝೋನ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ದು ಈ ರೀಸೆಂಟ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಇಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ವಿ ಆರ್ ರಿಡ್ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ ದ ಬಫರ್ ಝೋನ್ಸ್. ಬಫರ್ ಝೋನ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಈಗ ಏನು ಲೇಕ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ವೆಟ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದೀವೋ, ದಟ್ ಕುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಬೀನ್ ಡನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಬಫರ್ ಝೋನ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ವಿ ಕುಡ್ ರಿಟೈನ್ ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಏರಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ದ ಲೇಕ್ಸ್, ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಇಡ್ಬೋದಿತ್ತು. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇವಾಗ ನಾವು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಟ್ರೀಟೆಡ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಟು ಎವ್ರಿ ಲೇಕ್, ವಿಚ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್. ವಾಟರ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ನಡೀತಿಲ್ಲ. ಓನ್ಲಿ ಆನ್ ದ ಬ್ಯೂಟಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮೆನಿ ಆಫ್ ಅವರ್ STPs ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನಲ್ ಟು ದಟ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್. ದೇ ಟೆಲ್ ಟೆರಿಷರಿ ವಾಟರ್ ಬರ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ, ಬಟ್ ಇಫ್ ಟೆರಿಷರಿ ವಾಟರ್ ಕಮ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ವೆಟ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದೆನ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಲೇಕ್, ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ದಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗಿವ್ ಮಚ್ ಬೆಟರ್ for the birds, for the biodiversity to survive and sustain. That will be much better anta nanga ansutte.
So the lake itself needs shallower zones for the waders, and we can redesign wetlands, islands for nesting and roosting. Other kade gamana kotre, we can achieve 100% biodiversity than what we are doing now.
Yes. There might be one or two cases agde irbodu, but we can push for a larger number of lakes to bring back what we have lost.
So just pushing this idea around. Would you think that these lakes should actually be designed or managed as wetlands now or as water bodies? Or is there an option in which we can do both?
See, these water bodies, carries, originally, of course, as we all know, many of them served as irrigation tanks, and the water used to be let out during the dry season. So we have now changed the entire system. The catchment has changed. Some of them are now being filled with water throughout the year. They were never meant to be like that in the original design. So these are all human-made interventions. Now, for biodiversity as a whole to thrive, aquatic biodiversity, including the semi-aquatic like birds and turtles, all of included, we have to have a combination of designs. So in some parts of Bengaluru, if you actually have a shape or geometry of the water body such that there are shallow areas, there are mud flats, there are then those areas which are you need the wetland to actually store water during the monsoon from the additional runoff you're getting because of built up spaces. Then actually you can combine both flood storage as with biodiversity conservation. So that would be one, instead of keeping them full throughout the year. There are other parts of Bengaluru where actually we can have a very different type of design where you can have water throughout the year, but maybe not in the soup bowl structure, which is for maximizing water storage. And so this biodiversity aspect, as often people have usually looked at birds and they look at fish. But actually, when we look at the functionality of these wetland ecosystems, you need macroinvertebrates, you need other species. So, for example, in our constructed wetlands in our long-term urban ecological observatory in Kengeri, we were pleasantly surprised to find two species, unique species. One is freshwater, the sponge, and which is one of the oldest multicellular species, yes, on Earth, and then also the fairy shrimp. Now, these require ephemeral conditions. Wow. So, nutrient poor and also ephemeral conditions where even if you don't have water for a couple of years, they will get rejuvenated. So, we need to have some versions of all of these different types of wetlands across the city.
Right.
And so that we end up helping solve some urban problems, like in some places flooding is an issue, then we make sure that we have buffer storage left at the end of the dry season so that the incoming stormwater can be stored. In other places, we may not need to do that. And we may have to think about a different design. So I think this one design for all of Bengaluru's wetlands is detrimental to both the services that they can provide to our citizens as well as to biodiversity.
So this begs the question, do we have the right institutional knowledge and attention to be able to design these spaces better? One. The second part is, are we building enough knowledge in our students and children to be able to appreciate this value of design and therefore bring pressure on the system to design such spaces more?
I think collectively, Bengaluru has a community of academics, researchers, practitioners, activists, and citizens who have the knowledge and the wisdom and experience.
And who need to be included as part of the current form of design.
Definitely. I don't think there is any dearth of we just need to be able to harness this knowledge and experience and I know it's difficult because we also need the gray, that is blue, green and gray, which means we need the engineers. And, Karnataka is famous for its engineers, Visvesriya and so many. So we should be including the engineers in our team.
Right.
Without the engineering, because we've changed the hydrology of the city so much that even for these carries to be hydrologically functional, we may need to have interventions which may include canals, pipelines, and other types of drains and of course, sewage treatment plants. So the gray cannot be neglected.
Right. So just to build on that point, when you work, do you see enough knowledge and empathy in understanding what you're talking about when you talk about biodiverse designs?
There is, as per my knowledge, those who are being practitioners on the ground, they have to collaborate on a larger number, sir. It is always it is being like an individual institution going forward, which will not work.
Right.
It will not work. As sir told, there are a lot of tumba well-knowledgeable people are there who are building on policies, who are building on design and everything. I think collaboratively, everybody should come forward and then take it forward, because each lake's SOP is going to be different. It's not going to be the same. ನಾವೀಗ ಒಂದು ಕೆರೆ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ಸೆಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಈ ತರ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮೇಬಿ ಇನ್ ಅ ಸಿವಿಲ್ ಪರ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೂ, ಬಟ್ ನಾಟ್ the actual functionalities we can't bring out.
In an ecological perspective and even a social perspective, it is different.
Each lake, it's different.
So, what I want to push you both about is there's a livelihood component to many of the issues around biodiversity. Are livelihoods and social issues against biodiversity, or can they work in harmony with biodiversity? And if so, what kind of knowledge would be required to do both?
ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಕೊಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಇಂದ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಐ ಟಾಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಪೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್. ಪೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಗ್ರೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಪೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಮಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದ ಸಿಟಿ. ಹೀಗೆ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದೋಸ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಆರ್ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಫುಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಲೈವ್ಲಿಹುಡ್ಗೆ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಆನ್ ದಿಸ್ ರೀಜನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಪೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್ಸ್. So whether it's fish, whether it's vegetables, whether it's fruits, whatever we are getting in Bangalore, it's either from four corners of the city that is coming inside, because those functionalities cannot be done in the core city. That is of
Kolar, Chikballapur, Anekal, Ramnagaram.
Yes, around in the ಬರ್ತಿದೆ. So, ಈಗ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟೆಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಮೋರ್ ಇನ್ Bangalore ಅಲ್ಲಿ we already have the knowledge. We have reached a peak level on whether it's water bodies or other ecological perspectives. We have to move ನಾವು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕೇನು, ನಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಯಾಂಡ್ವಿಡ್ತ್ ಇನ್ನು ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. You have to go at least 70 kilometers around and start talking to those people so that this doesn't turn. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗೇನಾಗಿದೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ, ಮೆನಿ ಆಫ್ ದ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಇರ್ರೆವರ್ಸಿಬಲ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಅದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗದೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದೇ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಕಾಶಿಯಸ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಇಟ್. ಅಂಡ್ ದ ಪೀಪಲ್ ನಾವು ಐ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಕಮ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಆಫ್ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್. ಇದೊಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಿಷನ್. ನಾವು ಬಂದು ಹೋದ್ರೇನೆ ನಮ್ಗೊಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಿಷನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ವಿ ಡೋಂಟ್ ವಾಂಟ್ ವಾಟ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನಿಂಗ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಟು ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ ದೇರ್. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಪಾಸಿಬಲ್ ಇನ್ ಆರ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟೀಸ್ ವಿ ಕೀಪ್ ಟೆಲ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ದಮ್ ದಿಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್. ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ವಿ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ಈ ತರ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನ್ ನೀವು ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಆರ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ನಾವು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೋ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪುಷ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ವಿ ನೀಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಟು ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮೇಕ್ ಶ್ಯೂರ್ this in few years will not turn into that, because it's expanding very fast.
Exactly. So the point, again, I think that's a very valid point that he makes, that if you look at the BMRDA structure plan for the city, it actually designs for 8,000 square kilometers. And it's there as an old plan. So should Bangalore also not be worried about its vast hinterland and what can be done to make sure that it doesn't fall into the same trap as this 750 square kilometers? And so what could be the design framework to manage biodiversity at this scale?
So clearly, cities are generally used to be seen as places where nature is inevitably in retreat. So we have to change that paradigm.
Right.
And two, cities also depend on resources from elsewhere. And as we know, cities are engines of growth. They provide lots of jobs. They have an economy that is very important for us, all of us. Now, how do we make sure that some of this some part of this economy can actually contribute back for, in some sense, the long-term ecological assets to sustain not just the city but also its environs? And I think this exchange of resources, talent, water, materials between the surrounding areas and Bengaluru, we need to have, in some sense, a much more fair way of having opportunities for people in the city as well as in nearby areas to benefit from the city directly or indirectly. And ecologically speaking, I think that if we can take more stewardship of the way we manage water, the way we manage our agriculture, our green spaces together, both in the semi-rural as well as peri-urban, together, I think then that would make much more sense, because this movement of goods, services, people and ecosystem services, I think that is going to be the connectivity that we need. Actual ecological connectivity between the green spaces in and around Bengaluru with nearby areas, that should be part of our overall conservation planning. Because in the past, we always used to think about wildlife and biodiversity as something that you have to go to the Western Ghats or you have to go somewhere else. And if cities do not contribute to biodiversity conservation, that we may actually lose the plot.
We may lose the plot. And we're also lucky to have elephants corridors close by to us, and we are blessed to have various species. 1/3 of the butterfly species in India migrates through this corridor from the Western Ghats to the Eastern Ghats and other places. But as an eco-hydrologist, I would want to ask you, should the city place itself in a river basin and worry about the river basin catchment, how critical the biodiversity protection there is for us to live? For after all, every drop of water we drink within the city comes from the river Kaveri.
Yes.
And without its 2,250 million liters, this economic engine will not work. How important is the Kaveri basin and the Western Ghats to the city itself? And does the city realize this connectivity enough?
I think we need to do a lot more about this, because we can't simply be looking at the Kaveri at one point from where we are drawing the water for the city. We have to think about the health of the river in Kodagu, all the upper catchment, both in Karnataka as well as in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Because the catchment is spread across the three states. And we need to think about it at a basin scale. And actually that, I think in the long term, if we do all the hard work, we may actually find a way out of the conflicts over water, because we need to think about water for human requirements as well as water that needs to be left for the ecosystem to thrive as well. And I think what happens in Kodagu or in the upper catchments in the Western Ghats, whether it's related to the forest cover or other types of land use and land cover, fortunately, the type of agroecosystems that have emerged in the Western Ghats, yes, they may have cleared forest for it. But if you look at coffee plantations with native shade trees, there are other types of agroecosystems. If we can persuade them with incentives and encouragement to adopt more biodiversity-friendly practices, we may actually find that overall, we will be enhancing biodiversity not just in the Western Ghats, which directly or indirectly supplying water to Bengaluru and other cities, but also the citizens of Bengaluru also are part of the tourism that benefits those regions. And if we say responsible and sustainable tourism, whether it's Kodagu, whether it's Nilgiris, whether it's the fabulous national parks and wildlife sanctuaries that people from Bengaluru go to, I think this two-way connect between the ecology elsewhere and the ecology in the city, I think that we need to make culturally, socially, and economically.
Absolutely. And this tourism can also put unnecessary pressure unless well managed on these fragile areas and ecosystems. Sunil, ನಾವು ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಗಮನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವ ನಮ್ಮ ನದಿಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ?
ಅಷ್ಟು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್. ವಿತ್ ಮೈ ಪರ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ನೋ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಮೇಜರ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ ನದಿಗಳದು, ಈಗ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಕಾವೇರಿ ರಿವರ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ, ಈಗ we know what we have done to the river from past few decades, and most of the time it's irreversible. Some points it's irreversible because of the planning of the city, probably one of the reasons being like that. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಹೊರಗಡಿನ ನದಿಗಳ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಅಗೇನ್ ಅದರ ಕ್ಯಾಚ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ವೆಜಿಟೇಷನ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಬೀನ್ ತುಂಬಾ ರೆಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ, which is again causing a lot of problem for the downstream silt formations agirbodu. This is another problem that is causing. So ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ನಮ್ದೇನು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಆರ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಕಮ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಏನೇನ್ ದೊಡ್ಡದು ಬರ್ತಿದೆ, ವಿಚ್ ಆರ್ ಆನ್ ದ ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಲಾರ್ಜ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಬಾಡೀಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಲೈಕ್ ಮೇಕೆದಾಟು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಈಗ ಪಂಪ್ ಸ್ಟೋರೇಜ್ ಒಂದು ಬರ್ತಿದೆ, ಜೊತೆಗೆ ದೇ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಪುಟ್ ಅಪ್ ಸೋಲಾರ್ ಪ್ಯಾನಲ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಲಾರ್ಜ್ ಲೇಕ್ಸ್ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಇದೆಲ್ಲದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೂ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಮೂಡಿಸಿ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಟೆಂಪರರಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಲಾಂಗರ್ ರನ್ನಿಗೆ ಇದು ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದು ತೋರಿಸೋದು ತುಂಬಾ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಸರ್.
ಬಹಳ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಮಾತು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ. ವುಡ್ ಯು ಲೈಕ್ ಟು ಟಾಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ the urban heat island and the general warming that Bangalore is facing on birds and biodiversity? Apparently, there's a study that you have done on that.
Yeah, so heat stress, apart from affecting us humans, is also affecting biodiversity in various ways. And it also affects vegetation. And in a future climate, we may have to think about the water that plants and trees will require.
Evapotranspiration is on the increase.
And they do provide that cooling service through evapotranspiration. But to sustain that evapotranspiration, the seepages and leakages from our water supply system have been sustaining them.
It's very crucial.
Yes. But in the future, we may need water security just to maintain the green spaces and blue spaces of Bengaluru. And that water should not be obviously by taking more water out of the Kaveri, but we should be, one important resource that Bengaluru has been very good in generating is the treated wastewater. And we'll have to use that resource to meet the water requirements of some of our green and blue spaces. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that, yes, the heat island and climate warming is already impacting birds and butterflies. It's changing the places in Bengaluru where they can live. And many species of birds, based on our study, are showing a negative response to heat stress. And butterflies also respond very quickly to certain types of weather conditions and changes. That's what the work done by my colleague Ravi Jambekar and others has shown that. So future climate will also be a factor in our planning for resilient Bengaluru in terms of combining resilient biodiversity, which means that we may have to choose the way in which we are restoring species of trees, shrubs, herbs, and grasses, and also making it a little easier for biodiversity to cool themselves or to stay out of harm's way in a warming world.
Right.
And that is a big challenge. So we have to do it together. Anything that makes the city cooler for birds and butterflies is also going to benefit humans. So, I mean, in some sense, the two are to be done together.
So when you're taking an air conditioner next, think about what you're doing to birds and butterflies outside. But for you, the question is there something that a layperson or a citizen can do in his or her small way to impact biodiversity more positively?
Definitely, sir. Individually, there are a lot of things that we can do. One is that we can, again, switch to our native species of shrubs in our garden where it increases pollinators. And second thing is we can always, participate in many of the citizen movements that's happening.
And community
activities that is happening. And if you come to water harvesting is one important thing that we have to do. Then I've been telling, when I go and talk to a lot of apartment people, I tell them like, ಇವಾಗ ನಿಮ್ದು ಎಲ್ಲ ತರದ್ದು ಗ್ರೂಪ್ಗಳಿರ್ತವೆ, ಒಂದು ಎಕೋ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಇಷ್ಟು ಮನೆಗಳಿದೆ, ಇಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಯು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪ್ ವಾಟ್ಸ್ ಅರೌಂಡ್ ಯು. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಗಾರ್ಡನ್, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಏನಿದೆ. ಇಫ್ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ ಈಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನಿಂಗ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗಲ್, ನೋಟಿಫೈ ಇಟ್. ಅಂಡ್ as you celebrate all other festivals, okay, you can have every 3 months on the awareness program. You can bring in a lot of people who have the knowledge for your kids to have that from a very young age to get involved in all those things. Adu community level al madbodu. Again, as a whole area ತರ ಇಲ್ಲ ಹೋಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಿಟಿಸನ್ ಮೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಿರತ್ತೆ. ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂಡ್ ಪೆಟಿಷನ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ go through the notification and see if it is going good towards ecological restoration illa biodiversity surviving. Illa andre we will learn about it and notify the government or whichever authority it is that so and so consequences will be happening anta. So
that's very nice suggestions. I mean, very practical one, which is doable at an apartment scale or even at an individual scale to become involved in raising your own awareness, then participating in community activities. It took the birdwatchers group to first notify that our lakes were under stress, which led to the Lakshman Rao committee report. It took 3 or 4 concerned citizens to say that the Hesarghatta grasslands were under threat and something needs to be done about it. And so it got protected. So do you still see the need for individual awareness and action? And how should that be fostered?
I think it's very important. The fact that citizens were able to muster themselves and engage in collective action to achieve these conservation goals, I think is very inspiring. And we need to do more of that, but perhaps maybe at a more decentralized level. Whether it is an iconic tree or whether it's a patch that is irreplaceable or a local water body, these are all actions that I think are better done by people who are living in that area, who are neighbors of and living with coexisting with the biodiversity. I think that type of awareness and action will play an important role. Also, there are some areas which are large enough where all of Bengaluru will benefit. And yes, you will continue to have action at a slightly larger scale. But I think that what we really need is people in each locality to start looking out for the biodiversity that they can make a difference to.
The last point I want to discuss with both of you gentlemen is in the Gram Panchayats, it's mandatory to maintain a biodiversity register. Should we want to imitate that or should we want to replicate it at our ward levels? Should ward committees not have biodiversity registers to map local neighborhood community biodiversity and to draw plans to manage them better?
I think that's an excellent idea. And I can give you examples because, in every ward, there will be some iconic large trees. which are, long-lived, they're irreplaceable assets. Because, to replace a large tree, which has grown to that size over 50, 60, 70, or even 100 years, no matter how many saplings you plant in lieu of that, it's not going to make a difference. Whether it's in terms of the benefits it was giving to people, the shade, the carbon sequestered, biodiversity support, everything, it's very difficult to compensate for that. So iconic trees in the neighborhood, for example, there might be nesting sites of some species. That particular ward might be very rich in, say, butterflies, or it might be hosting, as in some cases, a small population of slender lories. So these are, I think, better if we decentralize the information, knowledge, and the stewardship. I think for a city, for an urban conservation plan, I think it's the forest department which can only play a role in places like Bannerghatta National Park and a few urban forests will not be able to take care of everything. And in the city, I think the panchayats and ward committees and the councillors and citizens, I think we need to come up with our own conservation plan.
Right. What do you think? Community participation barbekare? Do we need more conversations and more dialogue with people who are more knowledgeable and general lay people at a community and a ward level in Bangalore? And should lakes, for example, be owned by wards instead of the Tank Conservation Development Authority?
First thing is that decentralized ಮಾಡೋದು ತುಂಬಾ important. Very, very important. Because as sir told, each area, the number of trees, the size of the trees, the age of the trees, the purpose they have been serving, ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ವೇರಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಡಿಸೆಂಟ್ರಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಇಟ್ಟು, ಅಂಡ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಈಕ್ವಲ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಟಿಕ್ ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ಓಕೆ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ತುಂಬಾ ನೇಟಿವ್ ನರ್ಸರೀಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಫುಲ್ ಆಫ್ ನೇಟಿವ್ ನರ್ಸರೀಸ್ ಇದೆ. ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್, ಎಸ್, ಬಟ್ ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫಿಕ್ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಬೆಳೀತಾರೆ, ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಬೆಳೀತಾರೆ, ಅವರು ಬೇರೆ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಬೆಳೆಯೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ಒಂದು 5 ವಾರ್ಡ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ಲಿ ಆರ್ 10 ವಾರ್ಡ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಫೈಂಡ್ ಅ ಸ್ಪೇಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ನೇಟಿವ್ ನರ್ಸರಿ. ಈಗ ಹೆಂಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ಎವ್ರಿ ರೋಡ್ ಸೈಡ್ ವಿ ಫೈಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಾಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗಾರ್ಡನಿಂಗ್ ಹೆಂಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಎವ್ರಿ 5 to 10 wards, if we have a native nursery that we are growing, people, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ದೇ ಗೋ ಟು ವಿಂಡೋ ಶಾಪಿಂಗ್, ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ ಏನಿದು ಅಂತ ತಿಳ್ಕೊತಾರೆ ನೇಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ಈಗ ಬರೀ ಮರಗಳೇ ನೇಟಿವ್ ಬೆಳಿಬೇಕಂತೇನಿಲ್ಲ, ಗ್ರಾಸಸ್ ಇಂದ ಹಿಡಿಬೋದು, ಶ್ರಬ್ಸ್ ಇಂದ ಹಿಡಿಬೋದು, ನಮ್ ಗಾರ್ಡನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹಾಕ್ಬೋದು ನಾವು, ವಿಚ್ ವಿಲ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ದ ಪಾಲಿನೇಟರ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸೊ ಆನ್. ಆ ತರ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ, ಈ ತರ ಡಿಸೆಂಟ್ರಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಮೋರ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ನೇಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಅಂತ ನನಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ.
ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಾರೋ ನಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ನಾನು ಒಂದ್ ಮಾತು ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಗ್ರೇಟರ್ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಅಥಾರಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಿದೆ, 5 ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಷನ್ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಇದು ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶನ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಡಿಸೆಂಟ್ರಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ. 369 ವಾರ್ಡ್ಗಳು ಬರಬಹುದು. ಇದು ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಅವಕಾಶನ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಈ ತರ ಡಿಸೆಂಟ್ರಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ, ಈ ತರ ನರ್ಸರಿಗಳು ಬೆಳೆಯಕ್ಕೆ. ಅಂಡ್ ಆರ್ ಯು ಆಪ್ಟಿಮಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ವಾಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್?
ವೆರಿ ಆಪ್ಟಿಮಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಸರ್. ಇವಾಗ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಇವಾಗ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಓಪನ್ for taking all the suggestions from the citizens. They are going around talking to people.
So climate change action plan allu barboda idu?
Barbodu sir. This idu actually barlebeku sir. This is utmost importance ಇದೆ actually presently ಈಗ. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಆಸ್ ಐ ಟೋಲ್ಡ್, ತುಂಬಾ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ವಿತಿನ್ ಟೈಮ್ we will be replacing all these exotic invasive species with our own native hardwood species for biodiversity to thrive more in this space.
Excellent. The young man is hopeful. Dr. Jagdish, with this institutional architecture, is there a window of opportunity if we seize the moment?
I think there is, because Bengaluru is known for its entrepreneurs. So we need to foster a new generation of ecological restoration entrepreneurs who know how to work together as in a team. And use the best available knowledge and resources that Bengaluru is endowed with for solving local problems. And I think that we have to be optimistic. If we are pessimistic in the conservation area, then, it's very difficult to move forward. And we must appreciate that there have been some positive developments in Bengaluru over the years. There was a time when lakes or carriers were very neglected.
Right.
At least now there is more awareness about them, and there is some action. There have been, so we have to appreciate that. Even on the biodiversity side, now there is more awareness about the biodiversity in Bengaluru. And even when Bengaluru has a lot of bird watchers, there are people who arrange tree walks. Then all our educational institutions, schools, they can actually benefit from the biodiversity heritage of Bengaluru and learn biology through direct observations rather than just from textbooks. I think the potential is there.
Right. And we have to seize the moment.
Yes.
So thank you both gentlemen for bringing this vast experience and this message of hope and the work you do to foster that in the city that we also love and we want to make it more livable, especially for the next generation. So thank you. You listen to the biodiversity knowledgeable people on this episode of Climate Charche. It's been my pleasure to have hosted them, and hopefully you will tune in to the other episodes of Climate Charche also.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಹೇಗಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಆರಾಮಾ
ಒಂದು ಕಾಫಿ ಅಣ್ಣ